Hey, welcome back to Driver 88. Now usually we are very fortunate to drive a whole list of European sports cars and supercars, but today we have something a little bit different. If you grew up in Australia like me, there are a few nameplates that have had a bigger impact on just Australian motoring in general and car enthusiasm than this nameplate, the Skyline and the GTR. Whether it's drag racing, just general car culture in general, touring cars, anything you could possibly imagine, the GTR has been a brand that people aspire to in this country, and many of my friends have owned these cars and continue to do so. So we've got something pretty special, a GTR NISMO 2016. Are you crazy to buy one today? How well have they aged and how does it drive? I haven't been behind the wheel of a GTR for a couple of years, so I'm really excited to take one for a drive. Let's go find one downstairs. So what makes a NISMO GTR a NISMO GTR? I'll see if I can remember the long laundry list of things. Firstly, we have carbon bumpers, we've got a carbon bonnet, carbon boot lid, we have carbon diffuser and carbon front splitter that are larger than the standard GTR that create more downforce as well as more airflow. We've got special raised wheels, we've got a titanium exhaust, we've got, I believe, an improved anti-roll bar. We've got obviously very cool NISMO badging. We've got the bucket seats. We've got larger turbos. We've got different NISMO suspension tuning, many things that turn this into a NISMO. Not only did this facelifted car from 2016 get all these NISMO upgrades, but in 2019 and 2023, Nissan continued to improve the NISMO with more and more tuning and add-ons, as well as sort of carbon fiber bits over the front louvers. The bonnet is quite heavy. Now there's a few things I knew I would forget. Firstly, the improved fuel pump in the NISMO, as well as more strengthening of the chassis due to, I think, more welds, or at least better welds. So we have a more rigid performance when you're driving. Engine bay looks absolutely fantastic in the GTR. This makes 592 horsepower, 652 Newton meters, and that is, I think, the second most powerful GTR you could buy across its massive 17 years of production. 2.7 seconds or maybe a little bit faster of that 0 to 100. Nissan told, or at least I've seen some Nissan publications saying that the NISMO continued to get faster over its lifetime, particularly after 2019 and 2023. Of course, this car was quite fast in a straight line and still is. If you have a good surface and hookup, you can get into the 10s. I've seen 10.8 and maybe even faster in a perfect scenario. But it's not really so much set up as a drag car that so many people modify them and use them as drag cars across the world. Of course, there's that massive publicized 7 minutes and 8 second Nürburgring lap time, which was 30 seconds faster than the original GTR. And when you think about 7 minutes and 8 seconds, that's still incredibly fast today, given this is now pushing about 12 years old or so. So really impressive on a track. Now, I am keen to drive this thing. The last GTR that I drove was my brother's car, and I was comparing it to my GT4. You couldn't get more differences between two cars at all. So this being a NISMO, just everything is just that little bit more tighter and more performance focused. So we'll take it for a drive now. Then we're going to talk about money and what's happening in the market with these things. So I'm a big fan of the interior, to be honest. I like that there's a bit of a hark back to the R35 here. And being the NISMO, we've got lots of Alcantara. Nissans of old didn't feel that, I guess, high quality in the interiors, but this just feels really solid and well built. I like all the touch points, the leather gear shift, and of course, a traditional handbrake. But the stitching and leather pieces, everything just feels really sturdy and well built. All right, guys, NISMO GTR, how cool. First thing that comes to mind with driving this around today is how much attention NISMO GTRs still get. I just had a guy in a 4-door R32, I would assume quite highly modified, just rip past us. One thing that I sort of noticed straight away in driving this car is how easy, of course, it is to drive. There's no reason, and it's unlikely you would, but there's no reason why I couldn't daily drive this GTR. It's easy to get in and out of. It's got really good visibility. Reversing camera is even good. And of course, it's just easy to cruise along with. The next thing that of course comes to mind in pushing this car a little bit, it was highly sort of discussed when the GTR first was released. This car does feel heavy. You know, 1,750 or so kilos for a sports car, and you feel it when you're transitioning the weight and even turning into corners relatively quickly. You certainly feel that this is a pretty heavy car. Another thing that comes to mind also, when the R35 was first released, so many people said this is like driving a PlayStation. It's like driving this computer, basically. And when I get in this, and so many of the modern supercars and sports cars that we drive, this now actually feels a bit more raw and exciting in the way that it changes gears, and it's just a little bit louder than a lot of the cars that we drive because they're full of particulate filters and 500 cats, and they're just not that loud and not that exciting even to cruise around in. I'm a huge fan of these Recaro buckets. They're very comfortable, yet they still keep you quite firmly in place. And I've always felt like the standard comfort seats were just like these massive couches in the GTR of previous years, or I guess in the premium models, right? But huge fan of these seats. And Alcantara throughout is very nice. It's just a really focused place to sit in. And I love the fact that we have dials, physical dials. We only need 1 or 2 small screens to give us enough information. We don't need to have 7 acres of screen ahead of us. So it's always nice to see a tach and a speedometer. Now, if we turn everything up, as it's really, really tempting to do all the time, of course, this is a very stiff suspension, but this 600 PS comes on with quite a nice progression even for a twin turbo car. You do need to keep the revs up. Like, I think peak power comes in at something 6,000 RPM or so. I'd have to put it on screen right now, but she does need some revs. And the more that you put in, I think the more you're rewarded, particularly by the enormous amount of grip from these tires and the all-wheel drive system. It's just really, really, like, you can feel the potential is just so far ahead of most people, including myself, once you start pushing the GTR along. Now, I might be a little bit spoiled with driving ultra fast dual clutch gearboxes these days. This 6-speed Borg Warner American dual clutch is certainly starting to show its age a little bit, but like a lot of gearboxes around this vintage now, sort of 10 plus years old, it just takes a little bit of getting used to, and you'll get the most out of it pretty quickly once you know to sort of give it just that little bit of extra time to change where you want it to. Now, I don't think we have a front lift, but the front splitter and rear diffuser are so jutting out and so low, I'm just like crapping myself every time I have to go over a speed bump and just wanting to make sure that I don't damage this quite rare and special car, because it is by no means a cheap one. Now, we're so fortunate that I've had the privilege to drive this NISMO GTR. What an amazing car. Just really, really cool things. This one, if you're interested, is available with our friends at Cavallo Prestige. Practically a brand new car. It's just stunning to drive. They have also really, really nice brake feel. I love the feel on the brakes of this thing. That's something that stood out to me against modern supercars. Yeah, just very cool things. They have such incredible presence on the road. They're just absolute monsters in their size and presence. Now, personally, even though I'm a Euro guy, I think that the NISMO GTR has aged incredibly well aesthetically. It gets so much attention on the road. I still think that it looks so good for a 10-plus-year-old car. And I think that is definitely shown in its values. Now, there's 50 cars for sale here in Australia. They range from a whopping like $90,000 all the way up to 600,000 Australian dollars asking. That is because even though 48,000 units were built across that 17 years, some of them are a lot rarer and a lot more special than others. This one being particularly special, asking I think a bit over $400,000. Now, when these cars came out in 2008, they were about 170, 180,000 Australian dollars. For reference, that was the same price of the C63 AMG at the time. So you can imagine for that same price of a C63 AMG, you could get a very, very fast track car that would also do under 3 seconds 0 to 100, so quite incredible. Over the years, it's well documented, these prices went up and up and up and up and up. By the time we got to 2021, a NISMO like this was a sticker price of 430,000 Australian dollars, starting at 170. So you get a lot extra for your NISMO, but you certainly pay for it. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking, and I know a lot of Aussies balk at the price of 400,000 or so dollars for a GTR. When you consider in 2021, an Audi R8 or a 911 Turbo were quite similar money, but this car is like 15 to 20 seconds or so slower on the Nürburgring than a NISMO GTR. So that's a NISMO GTR. Goodness me, I think it has aged really well in a decade or so. Amazing car to drive and look at. Who knows when Nissan is going to get their act together and finally actually build another one? Really have no idea. Otherwise, this is Driver 88. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.